When you think about the kids that you've seen that are really successful, what do those kids have in common? What are the skills that they have that you think are absolutely critical to their success? Anybody have some ideas?
I would think agency and self-direction, the ability to motivate themselves when no one else is actually trying to motivate them.
Inquisitive and perseverant. They don't give up, even when it's hard.
I think one thing is curiosity, that they're curious about the material in general.
This is a question that many of us at Turnaround have been thinking about and spending a lot of time researching. We're an organization that connects the dots between science and stress and performance. So we ask ourselves, which are the skills that kids need to be ready and engaged learners? And if we knew what those skills were, could they intentionally be taught? So a group of us at Turnaround began to read the literature on how kids acquire the skills and beliefs to become engaged learners. And we were looking at literature from diverse fields because we really wanted to understand how the process happens, how it happens anatomically, how it happens neurobiologically, and how it happens experientially in schools. So what happened is that a framework emerged from the literature, and we call it the building blocks for learning. It's a developmental roadmap, a framework for comprehensive student development that has some really unique features to it. One is that it builds on the work of other people who have been studying human development. The framework takes into account that skills build upon each other and need to be integrated. That it's very hard to go and decide to build agency, but it's not hard to think about building toward agency. If we think about how children learn math or how they learn how to read, they don't start at the top with complex literature. They start with blocks. And those blocks happen in a sequence and they build upon each other so that children ultimately acquire more complex skills. One of the aims of this work is to build practices so that a child learns to be a learner while they're learning history, while they're learning math, while they're learning how to read. Not as if this was some separate course, but something really truly integrated in education itself. When we began to read the literature for building blocks, we had to establish criteria for what would qualify as a block. And the three criteria were that the skill had to be aligned to the development of a child as a learner in an educational setting, that the research had to demonstrate a direct tie to academic achievement, and that it had to be a measurable and malleable skill, not something you're born with. Because how important is it for this kind of development to be something that can be intentionally taught? What would that mean if more kids could reach those higher order skills that you see on the top of the framework? Let's talk for a couple of minutes about what you see in kids who struggle, because you've all seen kids who struggle in the classroom. Can you tell me some of the ways in which they struggle? Some of the skills perhaps that they don't have?
I see kids who can't self-regulate their behavior. They get frustrated and angry so quickly.
I would say I see students who have a hard time paying attention to be able to focus on material for a long period of time without feeling antsy and needing to get up or move around.
I've seen students who lack confidence and just don't believe they have what it takes to succeed.
So let's take a look at our framework again and look at the skills on these three rows. They have a similarity to the things that you all have just said. You spoke about self-regulation, the ability to regulate behavior and attention. You spoke about confidence, self-efficacy. You spoke about a sense of belonging. Do I see myself as a student? Do I see myself as somebody who has what it takes? The skills on the bottom three rows of building blocks are supposed to develop when children are 0 to 5. You're saying that the skills on those bottom 3 rows are not fully in place with your kids. So one of the most stunning findings in reading the literature for building blocks is that the entire K-12 system is organized based on the belief that children come to school in kindergarten with these skills in place, and they don't. So what this means when you think about standards, complexity of academic material, Common Core, that children are coming into school with uneven development of these skills. Then we apply pressure to the teachers as well as the kids to master complex academic material. And what happens? Teachers are very stressed, but probably most importantly, children fall farther and farther behind, and the achievement gap widens. Another important thing in this framework is the question, what's the relationship between the skills that you see on the bottom 3 rows and the skills in the top 2 rows? Because when you spoke about the skills of successful students, there they are. Self-direction, curiosity, perseverance, agency, all the things that you were talking about before. So there are strong correlations between the skills on the bottom 3 rows and the top 2 rows. 2 particular correlations that were especially strong were between self-regulation and resilience, and self-regulation and perseverance. Now, it intuitively makes sense that kids that are better able to regulate emotion, regulate behavior, regulate attention, are going to be much more likely to be perseverant and develop these higher order skills. So what does that mean? That means that not only are kids who grow up in adversity at risk because they are not developing the skills on the bottom 3 rows, these kids are also at risk not to be able to develop the skills on the top 2 rows. And if they attend schools that don't prioritize the development of these skills, what would you expect that would happen? And that is further widening of the achievement gap, and frankly, further widening of the opportunity gap. Brains are malleable. They grow in response to the environments and relationships that we put children in. At the neurobiological level, our gene expression is a function of the environments and relationships that we expose children to. What this means is that we have the power to use this kind of scientific knowledge, the scientific knowledge that intentionally develops children. We can take the context that they're in, we can personalize it in our schools by creating environments that are physically and emotionally safe, filled with trust, relationship-rich, buffering stress, and that intentionally develop the skills and mindsets that you see in building blocks so that kids, when they enter schools, can be in places that intentionally develop the skills that are going to enable them to reveal their full potential, the full potential that lives inside their genome. So these switch mechanisms, the switch mechanisms that determine the expression of our genes, are based on the environments and relationships that we all have grown up in, for good or bad. When those environments are filled with stress, one set of outcomes happens. When those environments intentionally support the growth and development of children, this tells a very, very optimistic story of what's possible for many, many more children. What we want to do is to stop asking kids to beat the odds, but instead use science to change the odds for many more children. And we can do that by intentionally building environments that power children's development.